The moon of Veljara was not listed in most Terran star maps. Tucked between twin gas giants, veiled in a cloaking nebula of living spores, the world had long been marked culturally restricted by the Intergalactic Treaty of Uncontacted Civilizations. That should have been enough to keep curious explorers away. It wasn't. Jace Calder wasn't a hero. He wasn't a knight. He wasn't even a particularly good pilot. He was a salvage scout, scouring the outer systems for forgotten tech, crashed relics, and ancient materials he could sell to keep his one-man ship from falling apart. His latest assignment had been a dud. A dead moon with a silent beacon. But a strange energy spike in the nearby nebula lured him to Velzara. He thought it would be a quick scan and go. He did not expect to walk into legend. After hours of trekking through dense, alien flora that glowed faintly beneath the twin suns, he found the clearing, silent, circular, ringed with obsidian pillars and layered with petals of indigo moss. At the center, there it stood. A massive stone slab taller than he was, veined with cracks that pulsed like a heartbeat. Embedded deep within it was a single sword. Not rusted, not ancient-looking, but perfect. Its silver hilt shone with alien runes, its blade long and straight, humming faintly with restrained power. Jace tilted his head. Right, because that's not suspicious. He approached slowly, scanning with his datapad. No traps, no energy fields, just a sword in a rock. It felt almost ridiculous. And yet, something in his gut pulled at him, a sensation that this wasn't salvage. It was waiting. Jace looked around. No one. Well, he muttered, let's disappoint destiny. He reached out and wrapped both hands around the hilt. It came free like it had been sunk into butter. No resistance. No fanfare. Just silence. Then the world shifted. A sonic boom rippled through the jungle. The stone cracked apart with a groan, sending moss and petals swirling into the air. From the forest edges, shadows moved, armor glinted. And then they stepped into the light. Dozens of towering figures clad in ceremonial battle plates, faces painted with the marks of Velzaran caste warriors, and every single one of them was a woman. They stopped at the edge of the ring, weapons in hand but not raised. One stepped forward, taller than the rest, with a mane of silver dreadlocks and eyes that glowed like molten amethyst. She looked at Jace, then at the sword, then back at him. The Kashal has awakened, she declared. Jace blinked. The what now? Lay down the blade if you are unworthy, another called from the circle. You have 5 seconds. More warriors emerged, 40, 50. Some on foot, some on hoverbikes, some with pulse bows trained on him. The air was electric with tension. Jace looked at the sword in his hands. Oh crap. They didn't kill him. That was a good start. They surrounded him, disarmed him gently, and escorted him with a formation tighter than any royal guard Jace had ever seen. He kept his hands raised, the sword awkwardly tucked under one arm as they marched him through the jungle toward a mountain pass lit with floating lanterns. Every step of the path was marked by glowing stones that pulsed when his feet passed. Veljara wasn't just a moon. It was alive with culture, ceremony, and eyes that watched from every vine. As the warrior escort brought him to a massive stone temple carved into the side of the cliff, Jace whispered to one of them, "Look, I think there's been a mistake. I didn't mean to take your sacred sword or whatever. I thought it was just stuck." The warrior didn't respond. She looked forward and marched in lockstep. They led him up hundreds of steps to a throne chamber made of polished crystal and vine metal. The walls depicted ancient murals, figures of women with wings, dragons with spiral eyes, a sword and a rock surrounded by stars. At the center of the hall was a high platform with a circular dais. And seated upon a raised throne of carved ivory was an elder woman robed in deep green and obsidian, her presence heavy, her gaze sharp. The warriors fanned out. Jace was nudged to the center. The elder rose. "I am Matriarch Virel of the High Vel bloodline," she said. "You have pulled Zevrak's fang. You are now bound by right and law to fulfill the destiny of the Keshal." Jace held up both palms. "Okay, right, I'm sorry. Who is the Keshal? And can I just say, I don't even know how I did it. I wasn't trying to offend." "The Keshal," she corrected, "is the blade-bound king, the only male permitted to rule by right of strength. Pulled from the stone, he must take the mantle of lordship, bind the sword, and, by ancient vow, marry the chosen heirs of the Vel houses." Jace froze. "I'm sorry. What?" The matriarch motioned toward the far end of the chamber. 5 warriors stepped forward. Each wore a different color armor: gold, crimson, violet, emerald, and bone white. They were tall, beautiful, dangerous. They stared at him not with admiration, but calculation. "These are the claimants," the matriarch continued. "Each has trained since birth. They will test you, study you, and in 3 nights, one or all must wed you for the sword to remain bound. Without union, the curse returns." "Curse?" Jace whispered. The matriarch's eyes narrowed. "Your reign has begun." Jace looked at the sword, then at the warrior women, then back at the matriarch. "This is not how my day was supposed to go." Above, the vines shivered in the temple wind. The sword pulsed, and fate smiled. The following morning began with a ceremony Jace didn't understand and couldn't interrupt. They dressed him in ceremonial robes that felt more like armor, woven with strands of stiff velvet and reinforced plates that shimmered beneath the sun. Strange glyphs embroidered the seams, symbols he was told had not been worn by a man in 700 years. His Terran boots had been confiscated and replaced with knee-high sandals laced with iron string, which made him feel like an overly dressed gladiator at a cosmic wedding he never RSVP'd to. He was escorted again by warriors, though these wore no helmets. They moved silently through the temple corridors, their expressions grim, respectful, but distant. It was clear to Jace that while some might have accepted the ritual, none of them yet accepted him. They brought him to a massive amphitheater built into the mountainside, where 5 platforms of glistening stone formed a star pattern around a central circle. Above, Veljara's twin suns painted the sky in twin arcs, violet and copper. The city beyond the mountains gleamed like a sculpture of light. At the heart of it all, 5 warrior women waited. The claimants. Jera stood first, armored in gold from throat to heel, her muscles corded with strength, her eyes burning like fire under pressure. She carried a glaive with a crescent blade and looked at Jace like he was a riddle she was preparing to answer with violence. Maleth followed, her crimson armor etched with sigils that pulsed softly. She was a skybreaker, one of the elite air riders of the Vel, known for their brutal speed and unmatched precision. Her face was calm, but her fingers never left the hilt of her belt dagger. Yuva was next. She wore violet robes that shimmered between fabric and flame, her long hair braided with crystal beads. She was the scholar queen, priestess of the inner temple, and the most unpredictable of the 5. Her smile was warm, but her eyes gleamed with mischievous sharpness. Ceres stepped forth from the shadows, her armor dull bone white, her eyes black as obsidian. She said nothing, simply looked at Jace with the weight of someone who had already decided his worth but hadn't yet revealed the verdict. Last came Carrie, the emerald-clad warrior whose dreadlocks had brushed his shoulder the day before. She moved like a dancer born for war, silent but fluid, as though her body had memorized the rhythm of every step before she took it. She looked at Jace and offered the faintest incline of her head, neither a challenge nor a welcome. The matriarch's voice echoed across the platform. "The Keshal has 3 nights to decide, but the claimants may test as they please." Before Jace could process what testing might entail, Zara stepped forward and drew her glaive. "I'll start," she said, her voice deep, her smile sharp. The warriors cleared the arena. Jace stared. "Wait, we're doing this now?" She spun the glaive once. "You hold the sword. Prove you can lift it twice." He didn't want to fight, but he also knew enough about warrior culture not to back down publicly. He drew the sword from his back, its vibrating through his bones, and tried to remember the defensive drills he'd learned on Mars as a teenager, more ceremonial than practical. Zara charged. She didn't hold back. For several breathless minutes, it was all reflex, dodging, blocking, sliding under arcs of gold. Jace realized quickly that the sword wanted to move, wanted to guide his hands. He surrendered to it, and each strike came easier, cleaner. Jera didn't speak, didn't grin. She tested, and when he finally spun beneath her strike and pressed the flat of the blade to her side, she stepped back and lowered her glaive. "Not a coward," she said. "Good." Maleth stepped forward immediately. "Now me." The tests continued, each unique. Maleth threw him onto a gravboard and launched them into the sky, where they wove between crumbling towers, dueling midair with blunted knives. Yuva lured him into a mental duel, pushing strange questions into his mind, forcing him to answer with visions instead of words. Cirrus said nothing, simply walked him into a cave where shadows tried to trap him in silence. He emerged covered in sweat, but with her nod of approval. Only Kari didn't test him, she watched, and when the day ended, she turned and walked away. Jace sat alone in his temporary quarters, a marble chamber carved into the cliffside, vines coiling through the skylight. He'd washed the sweat from his skin, bound the bruises on his ribs, and poured himself a drink made from local fruit that tasted like spicy honey. He didn't know what time it was. Time moved strangely here. He set the sword across his lap. It pulsed softly, almost like a heartbeat. It had no voice, but something in it always felt just shy of speech. When he'd fought with it, the blade had moved like it knew, not just how to strike, but when to stop. It hadn't been a weapon. It had been a partner. He whispered, "What the hell are you?" The sword did not answer, but the door behind him opened. Kari entered. No armor, no blade, just a long tunic of green silk that whispered against the floor. "You did well," she said simply. He looked up, surprised. "You didn't fight me. I watched. You didn't need to test me. I already have." He stared at her. "So, do you believe I'm your king?" She approached slowly, then sat opposite him, legs folded beneath her. "That word means something different to each of us. Some want a weapon, some want a father for their bloodlines, some want a symbol. I wanted to see if you would refuse." "Refuse what?" "The throne. The power. The obligation." He exhaled. "I would have if I could, but they're not giving me that choice." "You had it," she said, "when you stepped into the ring, when you fought with restraint, when you refused to pick a queen after the tests." Jace studied her. "Why are you here?" "To tell you something the others won't." She leaned forward slightly. "If you choose none of us, the sword will reject you. It will return to the stone. And Velzara will enter what we call the shadow season. A time of famine, fracture, and death." "Wait, that's the curse?" Kari nodded. "The sword is bound not to you, but to union. You must belong to Velzara, and Velzara only accepts what it claims." Jace rubbed his face. "So it's marriage or apocalypse?" She didn't smile. "I don't need you to marry me," she said quietly, "but I need you to understand what we've endured. Waiting, hoping, training, praying that the Kshal would come. Not to lead us, but to remind us what unity looks like." Jace looked down at the sword again. And for the first time, it didn't feel heavy. It felt necessary. When he looked up, Kari was still watching him. Not like a warrior sizing up a threat, but like a woman hoping the man fate had chosen might finally choose something back. The dawn that followed brought color to Velzara in a way Jace had not yet seen. The skies bled gold. Crimson mist curled between the towering cliffs. From the temple terraces to the jungle spires, the people of the warrior moon emerged. Not in armor, but in ceremonial robes laced with silver thread. Song carried through the air, not vocal but vibrational. Low tones that passed through the crystal-laced stones of the city like a living pulse. Jace stood at the center of it all, dressed in simpler robes than the day before. Charcoal gray with a green sash tied at the waist, Kari's color. The sword hung across his back, heavy but silent. He'd been told that today he would be presented. He hadn't been told what that meant. They led him to the court of fire and thread, the sacred chamber where rulers were announced and joined. It wasn't just a place of law, it was a living archive. The walls shimmered with holographic threads that moved with time, replaying memories from centuries past. Kings, queens, wars, betrayals, miracles. Some in color, some in silence. He walked through it like a museum of destiny, every image a reminder that he didn't belong here. At the far end, 5 pedestals stood. The claimants. Jera stood tall, arms crossed, expression unreadable. Malith stood in full skybreaker armor, her wings folded and face impassive. Yuva wore robes stitched with glowing ink, already smiling faintly. Ceres stood like a statue, still and cold. And Kari, as always, waited with quiet patience, dressed not in green, but in white. The matriarch appeared from the shadows behind the dais, flanked by elder priestesses whose robes shimmered like woven fog. Her voice, when she spoke, carried into the very bones of the court. "The Kshal has passed the rites. The sword has not rejected him. The people have not risen. Therefore, by law, he must now choose." The chamber silenced. Even the memory threads above ceased their movement. Jace looked at the 5 women. Each of them was deadly. Each of them beautiful. Each of them bound to this culture in ways he could never fully understand. but only one had sat with him in silence. Only one had asked nothing of him but to understand. He stepped forward and spoke, voice low but steady. "I didn't come here to lead. I didn't come here to marry anyone. But the sword chose me. And if I've learned anything in the days since, it's that being chosen doesn't mean being owed. It means being asked to rise." He turned toward Kari. "I don't want a throne, but I want you." Kari blinked once. "You do not need to say the words," she said. "I want to," he replied. He stepped forward, took her hand, and as the light threads above began to spiral anew, he placed the hilt of the sword between them. She closed her hand over it. The weapon pulsed, then vanished in a burst of silver fire, its form dissolving into their clasped fingers like a final seal. Gasps filled the court. Even the matriarch took a half step forward. "It has never done that before," she murmured. Jace turned to face the room. "Maybe it doesn't want to be a weapon anymore." The court did not erupt in cheers. There was no eruption, no proclamation, but across the chamber, warriors bowed their heads, not in submission but in recognition. He wasn't just their king, he was now one of them. Peace, it turned out, was shorter than prophecy. 3 days after the union of Kari and Jace, a storm breached the sky, metal, not wind. An armada of raiders from the Drenka system tore through the orbital silence and descended without warning. Belzara had enemies, Jace learned, many. Worlds who envied its silence, its secrets, its sacred metals. And without warning, the trials of marriage were replaced with war. The Vel warriors mobilized like fire through dry leaves. Skybreakers took to the clouds, while ground legions armed their mounts. Even the priestesses carried weapons hidden within their robes. Jace, now dressed in battle leathers Kari had given him, stood atop the forward tower, watching the fleet descend through the clouds like falling daggers. "You don't have to fight," Kari said behind him. He turned. "I do. Maybe I don't fight like you, but I didn't hold that sword for nothing." He activated the beacon core embedded in the sword hilt Kari had returned to him. Now reshaped, now bonded to both their blood. It extended into a new blade, longer, thinner, and humming with resonance. She stepped beside him. "Then we fight together." They joined the first line as the Drenka dropships breached the outer field. Explosions rocked the canopy. Beams of energy lanced into the stone towers. Warriors clashed midair, and amid it all, Jace and Kari fought. Not as king and queen, not as legend and consort, but as equals. Jace's sword struck fast, guided more by instinct than mastery. Kari moved like liquid steel, her daggers a blur. She defended his blind side. He covered her retreat. Together, they carved a path through the invaders, not with dominance, but with rhythm. When the Drenka commander fell to Kari's blade, the enemy ships broke formation and fled. Veljara had defended itself. But the legend had changed, not because of bloodline, not because of fate, because of choice. That night, back beneath the vine-lit canopy of their private quarters, Jace stood at the balcony while the twin moons shimmered overhead. Kari joined him, still streaked with dust, still breathing like a storm. "Why did you come to Velzara?" she asked. "Looking for salvage," he said with a smile. "You found something else," he nodded. "I found a sword. But more than that, I found something worth holding on to." Kari didn't speak. She simply kissed him, and the moonlight turned silver as it lit the kingdom of a human who never wanted to be king, and the warrior who had made him one. The days after the battle passed like echoes, soft, echoing with tension, and filled with unspoken questions. The people of Veljara had witnessed what none before them had. A king who had not ruled with decree, but fought shoulder to shoulder in the blood and dust of war. Jace, now bearing faint scars and sun-worn armor, became something more than a name in their stories. He became a presence, but with presence came pressure. He stood now in the chamber of the arbiters, where stone walls bore the handprints of every ruler before him. A council had gathered, not warriors but architects, farmers, educators, and elders from the lowlands. They demanded leadership, structure, trade routes, and balance. He was expected to know how to govern a people shaped by fire. He did. Jace spoke honestly. "I wasn't born here. I don't know your harvest seasons. I don't know your sky gods or the laws written in your blood. But I know how to listen." And he did. He met with crystal smiths in the dark forges of the northern caves. He flew with skybreakers into the upper clouds, learning the paths they carved into storm winds. He dined with priestesses, reading the old runes by torchlight until his eyes ached. He let Velzara speak through its people, its roots, its pain. Still, doubt lingered among the older castes. Many said the sword had made a mistake. Kari watched it unfold. She knew the tension of a throne too early claimed, but she also knew what she saw in him, the man who fought with humility, not conquest, who gave command only after understanding. One evening she found him standing before the flame shrine of the first queen, his fingers dusted in ash, tracing the oldest carved glyph. He turned as she approached. "Tell me something." "Yes?" "When the last Shal failed, what happened?" Kari stepped close, her voice quiet. "He tried to rule before he was one of us. He took the sword but not the burden." "And me?" he asked. "You carried the burden before you knew what it was." Jace exhaled. "They want me to become something I'm not." Kari reached out, took his hand. "Then show them that what you are is enough." The next day he stood in the Temple of Banners, summoned every clan chief and warrior elder, and said, "I will not command you, I will stand among you. If the sword made a mistake, let me prove it by my deeds, not by blood, not by ceremony. I do not own this throne, I share it." He dropped his blade before them. Silence followed. Then Saris stepped forward, lifted the sword, and handed it back to him. "Then you have already passed the test we never spoke aloud." The union was no longer a legal right. It had already happened when Kari placed her hand over his, when the sword dissolved into their shared blood. But tradition demanded more than truth. It demanded witness. So it was under the downpour of Velzara's storm season, with fire bowls burning defiantly across the temple's open courtyard, that the ceremony began. Rain soaked every guest. Thunder roared above. Lightning danced through the mountain peaks, and no one left. The warrior queens stood at the edge of the flame circle, each in ceremonial armor, watching as Jace and Kari stepped forward through the rain, barefoot, swordless, no crowns, no emblems. The priestess spoke the oldest words. "Let not power bind you, let not blood claim you, let only fire and rain bless what is freely chosen." Kari turned to him. "Do you still want this?" "I didn't come here to rule," Jace said, "but I'd face every storm to stand beside you again." She placed a hand over his heart. "Then stand, and never kneel again." The flames behind them flared upward, spirals of orange and blue lifted by wind and will. The sword reappeared in their joined hands, reshaped, glowing with pulsing silver. No longer a weapon, now a symbol, of choice, of balance, of a kingdom ruled by a man who never asked for a crown, and a woman who never asked for anything but truth. They kissed, and through storm and fire Velzara roared in triumph. Velzara bloomed under the reign of two souls who never sought it. Markets reopened between rival clans. Warrior schools once restricted to bloodlines now welcomed those from the lesser moons. The airfields were rebuilt. The outer sentinels, once rusting and unmanned, now pulsed with vigilance. Even the temple bells rang differently. Less in warning, more in rhythm. But peace, like prophecy, rarely sleeps without stirring. The warning came at twilight. A crimson streak tore across the evening sky, too fast for meteor, too erratic for comet. The sentinels lit up with alarms. Jace was already on the south wall with Kari, both watching the object descend, trailing light like a wound. It crashed in the far valley, beyond the borders, near the exile lands. Scouts brought back a shard of hull. Not Velzaran, not Drenka. This metal bled when cut. Its code was etched in dead languages. And inside the wreckage had been a single pod. Empty. That night, Kari stood in full armor again, blade across her back, dreadlocks woven with battle steel. Jace, dressed in field leathers, turned to her. "You think it's another raid?" "No," she said. "This feels older. It smells like something lost trying to find its way back." The matriarch summoned a closed council. The priests declared it an omen, but Jace disagreed. "It's a test," he said, "not of power, of unity." And he was right. The following day, creatures emerged from the valley mist, twisted echoes of life, not born but built, iron-backed things with skulls of stone and breath like smoke. Silent, without language, yet moving with purpose. Their target wasn't the people. It was the sword, or what it represented. They didn't invade, they reclaimed, ripping down monuments, draining power fields, infecting systems once tied to the temple's energy grid. The resonance that gave Velzara its life now marked it for unraveling. Jace led the defense personally. He wasn't the best swordsman. He wasn't the strongest. but he fought like someone with nothing left to lose and everything left to protect. Beside him, Kari moved like fire in armor, twin daggers flashing through metal flesh, voice steady, even in the storm. As the war machines advanced on the sacred grove, the place where the sword had first chosen him, Jace made a choice. He would return the blade to the stone. The grove was burning. Skybreakers circled overhead, casting shadows through smoke. The warriors held the last defensive line, blades bloodied, breath ragged. And at the center, Jace and Kari stood before the cracked altar where the stone had once pulsed. Jace knelt beside it now, sword in hand. Kari's voice shook as she stepped beside him. "If you give it back, we lose everything." "No," he said, "we change everything." He raised the blade. For a moment, it pulsed between them, silver fire flickering in the mist, whispering in a language only blood and memory could understand. Then he drove it back into the stone. A shockwave surged outward. Every machine stopped mid-strike, frozen, silent. Then one by one they fell, lifeless, as if time had finally caught them. The warriors stood in stunned silence. Kari turned to him. The sword was gone again. Only a scar remained in the rock, glowing faintly. But something else remained, something deeper. Jace straightened slowly. "They weren't here for me," he said. "They were here for the blade, for what it meant, for the cycle." Kari looked at the cracked altar, then at him. "You broke the pattern." He shook his head. "We did. Weeks passed, then months." Jace no longer wore the title of king, though the people still called him one. He and Kari rebuilt not by rule, but by presence. The throne room remained open, its windows unshuttered, the halls no longer echoing with ancient law, but alive with new voices. And the sword never returned. But they didn't need it, because Veljara had something greater now. It had a story, of a man who never sought a crown, of a woman who never needed saving, of a bond forged not by prophecy, but by choice. And in the heart of a galaxy that had forgotten how to listen, theirs was a kingdom that remembered.